In the vast expanse of space, terror gripped the hearts of every species in the Galactic Federation. The Grand Assembly Hall, a marvel of architecture that usually inspired awe, now felt like a tomb. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of species gathered, their faces marked with fear and desperation. Council leader Jiho stood at the central podium, his scaled fingers leaving marks where they gripped the smooth metal. His species, known for their calm and collected nature, showed signs of stress as his scales shifted colors from their usual peaceful blue to a disturbing shade of gray. The massive holographic displays behind him showed the destruction of the Luminar system in real time. The crystal cities of Luminar, once the pride of the Federation, were being torn apart piece by piece. The crystalline structures that had stood for millennia crumbled like sandcastles before an invisible tide. The Void Harbingers moved through solid matter, as if it were nothing more than mist, leaving only emptiness in their wake. Admiral Sunmai watched from her position near the emergency command center. Her tentacles, usually a sign of her species' legendary grace, writhed in agitation as she processed the tactical data streaming in. The Federation's most advanced weapons, technologies that could reshape planets and redirect stars, proved as effective as throwing pebbles at a solar storm. The antimatter cascades just passed through them, she reported, her voice carrying across the silent hall. The quantum disruptors, our most powerful weapons, don't even register on their form. Even the consciousness wave emitters, which can stop entire armies in their tracks, have no effect. The assembly watched in horror as another crystal city vanished from the displays. The Void Harbingers appeared as nothing more than moving shadows, yet they consumed everything in their path. Buildings, people, even the very ground beneath, all disappeared into what seemed like portable holes in reality itself. Science Director Tawan, whose species was known for their perfect memory and unshakable composure, struggled to maintain his professional demeanor. His fur, usually lying flat in precise patterns, stood on end as he delivered the latest report. His 8 eyes blinked rapidly, a clear sign of distress among his kind. "We've lost all contact with the Centauri colonies," he announced, his voice cracking. The news sent ripples of panic through the assembly. The Centauri system had been one of their strongest military outposts, protected by technologies that had taken centuries to perfect. "This marks the 15th system we've lost in this cycle alone." The representatives broke into chaos. Some species began their death prayers, others argued frantically about evacuation plans, and a few simply sat in stunned silence. The loss of 15 systems in one cycle was unprecedented. Each system had housed billions of sentient beings, countless species, and irreplaceable civilizations. Jiho raised his hands for silence, his scales now almost white with stress. "We must maintain order," he pleaded. "Panic will not save us. We need solutions, not fear." But fear was all they had left. The Void Harbingers had appeared 3 cycles ago, emerging from what seemed to be tears in space itself. At first, they had been dismissed as natural phenomena, strange but harmless space anomalies. That illusion had lasted until they consumed their first planet. Admiral Sunmai pulled up more tactical displays, showing the pattern of destruction. "They're methodical," she observed. "Each attack follows a precise pattern, yet we cannot predict where they will strike next. It's as if they're playing with us, testing our defenses before the final strike." The assembly hall's artificial atmosphere grew heavy with despair. The Federation, which had brought peace and prosperity to thousands of species over millennia, faced an enemy it couldn't even understand, let alone fight. Their greatest minds had failed to find a solution, their strongest weapons proved useless, and their most advanced technology might as well have been stone tools for all the good it did. As the representatives continued their desperate discussions, no one noticed a small blip on one of the secondary monitors. A tiny signal from a backwater system, barely worth noting in normal times, a planet called Earth, home to a species that might hold the key to their survival, but for now remained blissfully unaware of the shadow threatening to consume the galaxy. The 15th system disappeared completely from their scans, leaving only empty space where once billions had lived. The Void Harbingers moved on, their hunger apparently unsatisfied, searching for their next target in an increasingly terrified galaxy. In the Grand Assembly Hall, leaders of the most advanced civilizations in known space could do nothing but watch and wait, wondering which of their worlds would be next to vanish into the insatiable darkness that threatened to devour everything they had built over countless generations. In the dimly lit archives of the Galactic Federation, junior researcher Hejin sat surrounded by holographic data streams. Her small office, tucked away in the deepest level of the archive tower, had become her home over the past weeks as she searched desperately for any information that might help against the Void Harbingers. As she sorted through countless exploration records, something caught her attention. A small blue planet, classified as a developing world, showed no signs of Harbinger activity. At first, she thought it was a data error, but further investigation proved otherwise. Earth, as its inhabitants called it, had completely escaped the attention of the destroyers. Hejin's heart beat faster as she dug deeper into Earth's files. The planet's dominant species, humans, had only recently achieved spaceflight. They hadn't even established colonies beyond their moon. By Federation standards, they were primitive, barely more advanced than Stone Age civilizations, yet something about them was special. She immediately reported her findings to the Federation Council. Within hours, Ambassador Du Yun was selected for first contact. Du Yun's species, known for their ability to blend in with other life forms, made her the perfect choice for this mission. The ambassador arrived on Earth disguised as a human diplomat. Her initial reports were filled with dismissive observations about their primitive technology and fragmented political system. But as days turned into weeks, her messages began to change. These humans, she wrote in one report, fight constantly among themselves. Their history is an endless cycle of wars and conflicts. Yet when faced with a common threat, they show remarkable unity. They set aside their differences and work together with an efficiency that defies explanation. Du Yun spent time studying human military history, and what she found astounded her. While Federation species had evolved towards peaceful cooperation, humans had developed through constant challenge and adaptation. They had weapons that, while primitive by Federation standards, showed incredible creativity in their design and use. In one of her most important discoveries, Du Yun observed human children at play. Unlike Federation youngsters who followed structured learning patterns, human children engaged in chaotic, unpredictable games. Their minds seemed to jump from idea to idea in ways that made no logical sense, yet somehow reached surprising and effective conclusions. Their minds worked differently, she reported to the council. Where we see patterns, they see possibilities. Where we follow logic, they embrace chaos. When we reach limits, they imagine alternatives that shouldn't exist. The ambassador arranged a series of subtle tests, introducing human subjects to problems that had stumped Federation scientists for generations. The results were shocking. Humans didn't try to solve the problems using established methods. Instead, they questioned the problems themselves, approached them from completely unexpected angles, and often found solutions that seemed impossible. Most intriguing was their reaction to simulated Harbinger attacks. While Federation species froze in terror at the mere suggestion of the shadow beings, humans showed curiosity and determination. They asked practical questions about fighting back, proposed wild theories about potential weaknesses, and showed no sign of the paralyzing fear that had crippled more advanced civilizations. Du Yun's final report to the council was clear and urgent. "We must contact them openly," she wrote. "These humans possess something we lost long ago, the ability to face the unknown without fear. Their primitive state might be their greatest strength. They haven't learned to limit themselves with knowledge of what's impossible." The council debated for days. Many worried that involving such an underdeveloped species would violate Federation law. Others feared that humans might prove more dangerous than the Harbingers themselves. But as news arrived of another system's destruction, The decision became clear. They needed the humans, not for their technology or their resources, but for their unique way of thinking. Their apparent immunity to harbinger influence couldn't be coincidence. Something about human consciousness, about their chaotic, unpredictable minds, might hold the key to fighting back against the shadow beings that threatened to consume the galaxy. As the Council prepared for official first contact, Du Yun made one final observation in her personal log. These humans are not what we expected. They are both less and more than we imagined. Their technology is primitive, their society chaotic, but their spirits burn with a fire we have forgotten existed. Perhaps that fire is exactly what we need to drive back the darkness. The Federation's top analysts gathered in a secure chamber deep within their central research facility, their eyes fixed on the historical records from Earth. What they saw challenged everything they understood about species development. While most civilizations in the galaxy had evolved through peaceful cooperation and gradual technological advancement, humans had taken a completely different path. Colonel Park stood before a group of Federation military experts, his presence commanding attention despite being physically smaller than many of the alien species present. Admiral Sunmai watched with all four of her eyes as the human officer moved through a series of combat demonstrations that seemed to defy physics itself. "Your combat doctrines are based on predictable patterns," Park explained, helping up a Federation training officer who he had just thrown across the room. "You expect enemies to behave rationally. Humans learned long ago that the most effective strategy is often the least expected one." The demonstration continued as Park showed techniques that had been developed through thousands of years of human warfare. The Federation experts watched in amazement as he explained concepts like guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, and asymmetric combat. Ideas that seemed primitive yet devastatingly effective. In another part of the facility, scientists conducted tests on human volunteers. Dr. Hejin, who had first discovered Earth's uniqueness, led the research team. They exposed humans to simulated harbinger signals, the same ones that caused paralyzing fear in other species. The humans not only remained unaffected, but they actively tried to interact with and understand the signals. "It's extraordinary," Hejin reported to the Council. "The human brain doesn't just resist harbinger influence. It's completely invisible to their detection systems. It's as if humans exist in a slightly different layer of reality." More revelations came as the analysts dug deeper into human history. They found stories of tiny armies defeating vast empires, of people surviving in impossible conditions, of humans pushing beyond what should have been absolute limits of endurance and capability. Where other species sought harmony with their environment, humans had constantly challenged and changed theirs. Admiral Sunmai participated in a joint military planning session where Colonel Park introduced the concept of thinking outside the box. The Federation officers struggled with the idea until Park demonstrated with a simple puzzle. While they tried to solve it according to apparent rules, he simply picked up the puzzle pieces and rearranged them in a way no one had considered possible. "This is how humans think," he said, showing the solved puzzle. "We don't just look for solutions within the given parameters. We question the parameters themselves." The Federation's medical experts made another crucial discovery while studying human physiology. The very structure of human consciousness was fundamentally different from other known species. Where others had organized, predictable neural patterns, human brains seemed to operate in controlled chaos. "It's like looking at a storm," one researcher noted. "There's an underlying pattern, but it's constantly changing, never exactly the same twice." The harbingers feed on predictability. They literally cannot process human thought patterns. Colonel Park worked with Federation engineers to develop new weapons and tactics. He taught them to think like humans, to embrace uncertainty, and use it as a weapon. Under his guidance, they began modifying their advanced technology in ways its creators had never imagined. "Your weapons are perfect," he told them. "And that's their weakness. They need to be a little broken, a little unpredictable. That's what makes them dangerous." The Federation Council received daily updates on the Human Integration Program. Some members remained skeptical, worried about putting their fate in the hands of such an unpredictable species. But as more test results came in, even the doubters had to admit that humans possessed exactly what they needed to fight the Harbingers. Admiral Sunmei worked closely with Park, learning to understand human military thinking. She found herself both frightened and fascinated by their approach to warfare. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to survive, to adapt, to overcome. They treated impossible situations as challenges rather than defeats. "We've been fighting ourselves for millennia," Park explained during one session. "Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy has been tested and refined through countless conflicts. We're not proud of our violent history, but it's made us who we are." As the day ended, the Federation analysts compiled their findings into a single conclusion. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their physical capabilities, but their unique way of thinking. Their minds, forged in the fires of constant challenge and change, had evolved into something the Harbingers could neither predict nor counter. The question was no longer whether to ally with humans, but how quickly they could integrate human thinking into their defense strategies. Time was running out, and somewhere in the darkness, the Harbingers continued their relentless advance, unaware that they were about to face an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Commander Minna stood before a group of Federation soldiers in the massive training arena. The alien warriors, each from a different advanced species, watched with mixture of doubt and curiosity as the small human female picked up a simple wooden stick. "Your technology is impressive," she said, twirling the stick with practiced ease. "But it has made you predictable. Today, we're going to learn how to be unpredictable." The training sessions were unlike anything the Federation forces had experienced. Minna had them practice fighting with primitive weapons, forced them to adapt to sudden changes in battlefield conditions, and taught them to think without relying on their advanced combat computers. In one exercise, she shut down all their high-tech equipment and had them fight in complete darkness. The Federation warriors struggled at first, having never trained without their sensors and targeting systems. But slowly they began to understand what she was teaching them, how to trust their instincts, how to feel their way through chaos. Meanwhile, in the Proxima sector, Captain Sung-Ho prepared for the first real test of the new Human Federation combat doctrine. His fleet was smaller than traditional Federation battle groups, but each ship had been modified according to human designs. They had removed many of the automated systems, replacing them with human operators who could make split-second, unpredictable decisions. "A perfect machine is a predictable machine," Sung-Ho told his crew during the final briefing. "The Harbingers can calculate and counter any perfect attack. So we're going to be imperfect. We're going to be chaos itself." The battle began when Harbinger shadows appeared at the edge of the Proxima system. Instead of forming the standard Federation defense pattern, Sung-Ho's ships scattered in seemingly random directions. The Harbingers, used to attacking organized formations, hesitated for the first time since they had appeared. Commander Minna's training proved its worth as Federation crews acted on instinct rather than computer guidance. Ships performed maneuvers that their designers had never intended, weapons were fired in ways that defied standard protocols, and communication patterns changed constantly to prevent the Harbingers from predicting their movements. "Don't think about what you should do," Minna's voice echoed in their training memories. "Think about what no one would expect you to do." The Harbingers encountered something they had never faced before, an enemy they couldn't predict. Where they expected ships to retreat, they attacked. When they moved to consume a vessel, it would vanish and appear somewhere impossible. Human gunners, operating on instinct and emotion rather than computer targeting, landed hits that should have been impossible. In the command center, Federation observers watched in amazement as the battle unfolded. There was no pattern to the human-led attack, no logic to their movements, yet somehow it was working. The Harbinger shadows, for the first time, showed signs of confusion. Captain Sung-Ho pressed the advantage, orchestrating what looked like complete chaos, but was actually a carefully planned disorder. Ships switched positions randomly, weapons fired at seemingly empty space, and communication channels filled with meaningless chatter mixed with vital commands. The Harbingers tried to adapt, to find patterns they could predict and counter. But the humans had trained the Federation crews too well. Every time the Shadows thought they had found a pattern, it would dissolve into chaos again. Keep them guessing. Sung Ho commanded as he sent his flagship into a spiral that no sane captain would attempt. Don't let them think. Don't let them predict. The turning point came when a small group of ships performed a maneuver that violated several laws of physics thanks to some creative use of their drive systems. The Harbinger Shadows, unable to process what they were seeing, briefly became solid as their prediction systems failed. In that moment of confusion, the Human Federation force struck. Weapons fire from a dozen different directions converged on the solidified shadows. For the first time since they had appeared, the Harbingers took damage. The shadows retreated, leaving behind the first Federation victory against them. The cost had been high. Several ships were damaged or destroyed by their own reckless maneuvers, but they had proven that the Harbingers could be fought. In the aftermath, Captain Sung Ho addressed the Federation Council via holographic link. His ship showed battle damage, and his uniform was torn, but his eyes shone with fierce pride. The key isn't technology, he explained to the assembled leaders. It's the willingness to embrace chaos. The Harbingers feed on order and prediction. We beat them by becoming something they couldn't predict. Commander Minna stood beside him, adding, "This is just the beginning. We've shown them that we can hurt them. Now we need to teach everyone to fight this way." The council members, who had always valued order and logic above all else, struggled with this new paradigm. But they couldn't argue with success. For the first time since the Harbinger threat began, they had hope. As new training programs were established across Federation space, Minna's words became a battle cry for the combined forces. Embrace the chaos, become the unpredictable, and fear will become our weapon against them. General Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the flagship Thunderchild, a human vessel upgraded with Federation technology. The ship was a perfect blend of human unpredictability and alien advancement. Its clean Federation lines broken by seemingly random modifications that made it look almost incomplete. Around the Thunderchild, a fleet of similar hybrid vessels moved into attack formation. Each ship had been modified according to its human captain's instincts rather than any standard design, making every vessel unique and unpredictable. The fleet looked more like a gathering of space pirates than a military force, which was exactly what Jiwoo wanted. In his command center, Science Director Taiwan monitored the fleet's brainwave patterns. The combination of human and alien crews created neural signatures that seemed to flicker in and out of normal spacetime. His research team had discovered that this effect confused and disrupted Harbinger sensing systems. The human minds act like static in their perception, Taiwan explained to his staff. When we mix human and Federation crew members, the interference becomes even stronger. The Harbingers literally cannot predict where our ships will appear or what they will do next. The fleet entered Harbinger-controlled space, an area that had once been home to billions of Federation citizens. The Shadows sensed their approach, gathering in their usual attack formations. But something was different this time. The Shadows hesitated, their movements showing uncertainty for the first time. "They can't read us," Jiwoo announced to the fleet. "They don't know what we're going to do because we don't know what we're going to do. Trust your instincts. Act without thinking. Be human." The battle began with chaos. Ships jumped in and out of formation randomly, weapons fired in patterns that made no logical sense, and communication channels filled with a mix of human battle cries and alien languages. The Harbingers tried to adapt, to find patterns they could predict and counter, but the human-led forces refused to be predictable. On the science vessel, Ta-1 watched in amazement as his sensors showed the Harbinger shadows becoming increasingly unstable. Their very existence depends on being able to predict and manipulate reality, he reported to Jiwoo. The human chaos is disrupting their ability to maintain their form in our dimension. The breakthrough came when a young human gunner, acting purely on instinct, fired his weapons in a rhythm based on an old Earth song. The random pattern caused a section of shadow to solidify momentarily. Other gunners, catching on, began firing in equally unpredictable rhythms. More shadows began to lose their ethereal state. "This is it," Ji-woo broadcasted to the fleet. "Hit them with everything. No patterns, no logic, just pure human chaos." The hybrid fleet unleashed a barrage that defied physics itself. Federation technology, guided by human intuition, created weapon effects that shouldn't have been possible. Energy beams curved in impossible ways, torpedoes phased in and out of reality, and point defense systems created artistic patterns of destruction. The Harbingers began to retreat, but for the first time, their withdrawal wasn't orderly. The shadows scattered in different directions, showing clear signs of what could only be described as panic. They had encountered something they couldn't predict or control, and it terrified them. In the aftermath of the battle, Taiwan's research team made another crucial discovery. The human brainwave patterns weren't just disrupting Harbinger sensors, they were actually damaging the shadow being's ability to maintain their presence in normal space. Every human thought is unique, Taiwan explained to the Federation Council. Even when humans try to think the same thing twice, it comes out slightly different. The Harbingers, who feed on predictability and patterns, find this chaos poisonous to their very existence. General Ji-woo used this knowledge to plan larger offensives. Each new fleet would carry a higher percentage of human crew members, maximizing the disruptive effect on the Harbingers. The shadows began to retreat from system after system, unable to maintain their hold in areas with strong human presence. The Federation, which had always valued order and perfection, learned to embrace human chaos. Ships were modified to be intentionally asymmetrical, crew rotations were randomized, and battle plans were changed on whims rather than logic. "We're not just fighting the Harbingers," Ji-woo told his forces before each engagement. "We're showing them something they've never seen before, the beautiful chaos of human nature." As news of their successes spread, more Federation worlds volunteered to host human crews. The shadows continued to retreat, their once unstoppable advance now turned into a desperate withdrawal from the unpredictable force they had awakened. Taiwan's final report to the Council summarized what they had learned. The Harbingers are beings of pure order, feeding on the predictability of advanced civilizations. Humanity, with its embrace of chaos and unpredictability, is not just resistant to them. It is toxic to their very existence. We didn't just find an ally in humans, we found the natural predator of our greatest enemy. Dr. Hyun-suk stared at the test results displayed across multiple holographic screens in his laboratory. After months of studying the interaction between human consciousness and Harbinger energy patterns, his team had finally understood the true nature of their enemy and why humans were their perfect counter. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a complex wave pattern. His research team, composed of both humans and Federation scientists, gathered around. "When a Harbinger tries to maintain its form in our dimension, it creates a perfect mathematical pattern. But when exposed to human brainwaves, these patterns become unstable. In a sealed chamber nearby, a captured fragment of Harbinger's shadow writhed in apparent distress. Every time a human researcher approached, the fragment's edges would blur and break down. Federation scientists, however, could approach without causing any reaction. Commander Yu-jin watched the experiments from an observation deck. Her mind was already racing with tactical possibilities. As a veteran of numerous battles against the Harbingers, she had seen firsthand how human presence affected them. Now she finally understood why. "They're not just aliens," Dr. Hyun-suk explained during an emergency council meeting. "The Harbingers are living mathematics, beings of pure order trying to impose their patterns on our reality. Humans, with our chaotic thought patterns and unpredictable nature, are like a virus in their perfect system." Commander Yu-jin stepped forward with a bold proposal. "We need to take this knowledge and turn it into a weapon," she said, bringing up a tactical display. A massive fleet action, but not like anything we've tried before. Small ships, each with a human crew, diving directly into Harbinger concentrations. The council chamber erupted in debate. The plan seemed suicidal. Sending ships directly into the densest Harbinger formations went against every military doctrine. But Yu Jin had data to support her strategy. The closer humans get to them, the more their presence disrupts the Harbinger's ability to maintain cohesion, she explained. If we can get enough human minds close enough to their central mass, we might be able to force them out of our dimension entirely. Dr. Hyun-suk's team worked around the clock to modify ships for the mission. They stripped away non-essential systems to make room for specialized equipment that would amplify human brainwave patterns. Each vessel became a projection of human chaos, designed to be as disruptive as possible to Harbinger physics. Training for the mission proved challenging. Federation pilots, used to precise formation flying, had to learn to let go of their structured thinking. Human pilots taught them to rely on instinct and emotion rather than calculated maneuvers. Don't try to find the perfect attack path, Yu Jin instructed during simulation runs. The moment you start thinking logically, you become predictable. Let your humanity guide you. The research continued to reveal more about their enemy. The Harbingers weren't just feeding on worlds. They were trying to impose their version of perfect order on the galaxy. Each consumed planet became part of their mathematical pattern, making their hold on our dimension stronger. They see our chaos as a flaw in reality, Dr. Hyun-suk explained. They're trying to fix the universe by making it conform to their patterns. Human consciousness, which thrives on chaos and creativity, is fundamentally incompatible with their vision. Commander Yu Jin's plan took shape as more ships were modified and crews trained. The fleet would split into small groups, each led by human pilots, and drive straight into the heart of Harbinger territory. The goal wasn't to destroy them through conventional warfare, but to disrupt their ability to exist in our space. We're not fighting them, she told her pilots. We're showing them that their perfect order cannot exist in a universe that includes humanity. Our chaos is our strength. The modified ships were unlike anything the Federation had ever built. Their designs incorporated random elements, their energy signatures pulsed with human brainwave patterns, and their very presence seemed to distort the space around them. Dr. Hyun-suk's final discovery came just days before the planned assault. He found that human emotions, particularly strong ones like fear or determination, created even more disruption in Harbinger patterns. This led to a last-minute modification in the plan. The pilots would be encouraged to embrace their emotions rather than maintain military discipline. Your feelings, your humanity, your chaos. These are your weapons, Yu Jin told her crews during the final briefing. When you face them, don't try to be soldiers. Be human, be unpredictable, be everything they fear. As the fleet prepared for what might be their final battle, Dr. Hyun-suk shared one last insight with Commander Yu Jin. The Harbingers aren't evil, he said quietly. They're just the opposite of what we are. Where they seek perfect order, we thrive in beautiful chaos. This isn't just a battle for survival. It's a clash between two fundamentally different ways of existing. Yu Jin looked out at her fleet, each ship now a carrier of human chaos ready to challenge the perfect order of the Harbingers. The plan was dangerous, perhaps even suicidal, but it was also perfectly human, unpredictable, emotional, and defying all logical analysis. In other words, exactly what they needed to win. The combined fleet hung in space above the Harbinger's dimensional anchor point, a swirling vortex of impossible mathematics where reality itself seemed to break down. Captain Yunho sat in the command chair of his ship defiant, watching as the final battle plan unfolded. Around him, hundreds of small ships crewed by humans and their Federation allies moved into position. Each vessel had been modified to amplify human brainwave patterns, turning them into weapons against the perfect order of the Harbingers. The shadows gathered, their dark forms twisting in ways that hurt the eyes to watch. They seemed to sense that this would be the decisive battle, concentrating their forces in numbers never seen before. The very fabric of space distorted around them as they prepared for what they thought would be their final victory. "Remember why we fight." Eonho's voice carried across all frequencies to the fleet, not just for Earth, not just for the Federation, but for the right of chaos to exist alongside order. The first wave launched, small ships diving directly into the Harbinger formations. Human pilots, their minds deliberately focused on their most chaotic thoughts, created ripples of disruption in the shadow beings' perfect patterns. Where human consciousness touched Harbinger mathematics, reality itself seemed to shudder. Federation sensors recorded everything as the battle unfolded. Each human-crewed ship acted as a point of chaos in the Harbinger's ordered universe. The shadows tried to adapt, to find patterns they could predict and counter, but human unpredictability proved impossible to overcome. Captain Eonho watched as the first phase of the attack succeeded, creating weaknesses in the Harbinger formations. The time had come for the final thrust, a suicide run directly into the dimensional anchor point. He knew his ship would not return, but its destruction would create the disruption needed to seal the Harbingers out of this reality forever. For Earth and the Federation. His words echoed across space as the Defiant plunged toward the vortex. Other ships followed, each crew knowing they were sacrificing themselves to save not just their own civilizations, but the very nature of chaos itself. The cost was devastating. Thousands of human lives were lost as ships deliberately flew into the heart of the Harbinger concentration. But each sacrifice created more disruption, more chaos in the perfect patterns the shadow beings needed to maintain their presence in this dimension. The dimensional anchor point began to collapse as human consciousness, amplified by Federation technology, tore apart the mathematical foundations of Harbinger existence. The shadows retreated, their ordered formations breaking down into random movements for the first time. In the aftermath, Federation scientists worked quickly to erect barriers using recorded patterns of human brainwaves. These walls of chaos would prevent the Harbingers from ever returning, maintaining a permanent disruption in the areas they once used to enter our dimension. Months later, in the rebuilt Federation assembly, Admiral Sunma stood before a monument that symbolized their victory. A simple earth tree, its branches growing in natural, unpredictable patterns, reached toward the artificial sky. The plaque at its base read, "To the human spirit. The light that banished our darkness." Her human second-in-command stood beside her, both of them contemplating how the galaxy had changed. The Federation, once dedicated to perfect order and predictability, had learned to value chaos and unpredictability. Human influence had spread throughout their civilization, teaching them that true strength came from embracing both order and chaos. "We thought we needed to become more advanced to defeat them," Sun Mai said, her translator conveying the emotion in her voice. "Instead, we needed to remember how to be unpredictable." The human officer nodded, touching the tree's bark. "Sometimes the most primitive response is the most effective one." The Harbingers never understood that chaos isn't a flaw in the universe. It's an essential part of it. Around them, the Federation continued to change. Ships now incorporated random elements in their design. Societies learned to value spontaneity alongside structure, and the rigid patterns of the past gave way to a new appreciation for unpredictability. The final casualty reports listed thousands of human names, each one honored as a hero who had given their life to save not just their own species, but all species that valued freedom over perfect order. Their sacrifice had taught the galaxy that true strength lay not in achieving perfection, but in embracing the beautiful chaos of existence. As new generations grew up learning this lesson, the galaxy entered a new era, one where order and chaos existed in balance, where the most advanced civilizations learned from the most primitive ones, and where the light of the human spirit continued to shine as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is the courage to be unpredictable. *The End*.